Every expert is relying on generalizations. The individual gets exposed to so much information, they get analysis paralysis.
Increasing your protein, increasing your fiber are the two easiest ways to improve everything. Undigested protein is incredibly toxic and dangerous.
N of 1 gets a bad rap in today's world. You can craft the perfect diet for you right now. Every single high performance person access their inner pharmacy in a way that puts them in a positive state.
Welcome to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast, where we meet the world's top experts to explore the secrets of health, mindset, longevity, and so much more. Are you ready to take charge of your existence and biohack your life? This show is for you. Please keep in mind, we're not dispensing medical advice and are not responsible for any outcomes you may experience from implementing the tactics lying herein. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast. Oh my goodness, friends, I am so excited about today's episode. It is with, I think, the guests that I have had the most collectively on my shows ever. I love Matt and Wade so much. You guys have heard me talk about Bioptimizers for so long. They are the founders of that company, and I have had them on both of my shows so many times, and I adore what they are doing. And their new book, The Ultimate Nutrition Bible, is definitely the Bible of nutrition. Oh my goodness, this thing is huge. So much information in it. And I was so excited because I actually got to meet Matt and Wade in person last year at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference. And his next one is coming up in just a few weeks. It is not too late to get your tickets, friends. Come hang out with me. You can use the coupon code BCMelanie to get a massive discount on your tickets. It's going to be in Dallas. So many cool people are going to be there. So many guests that I've had on the show. Definitely go to biohackingconference.com to look at the lineup and use the coupon code BCMelanie to get a discount on your tickets. People are going to be there like, of course, Dave, Dr. Daniel Amen, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, Paul Saladino, Dr. Joseph Mercola, Dr. Dave Rabin from Apollo Neuro, Dr. Anna Kabecka, Dr. Patrick Porter. So many people I've had on the show, so definitely check it out. And if you do go, let me know. Please come up to me. I would love to meet you. But back to today's episode, I am a little bit obsessed with our conversation. We got into so many incredible topics. We talk about the simplest diet secret ever. Are you doing it? I was doing it without even realizing. We talk about why that diet secret works. We talk about GLP-1 inhibitors. I know you guys want to hear about that. The role of dopamine in diets, problems with the health at every size and intuitive eating movement, the pros and cons of bodybuilding, how to actually diet, how to actually lose weight. We talk about my weird Instagram food habit, the importance of finding a system that works for you, the magical 20% lock-in rule, the role of genetics in success with your diet, the controversy about protein and longevity, and so much more. The show notes will have a full transcript as well as links to everything that we talked about, so definitely check that out. That will be at melanieavalon.com/ultimate nutrition. And then there will be 2 episode giveaways for this episode. One will be in my Facebook group, IF Biohackers, Intermittent Fasting plus Real Foods plus Life. Comment something you learned or something that resonated with you on the pinned post to enter to win something that I love. And then check out my Instagram, find the Friday announcement post, and again, comment there to enter to win something that I love. All right, I think that's all the things. Without further ado, please enjoy this fabulous conversation with Matt Gallant and Wade Lightheart. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the show. I am so incredibly excited about the conversation that I'm about to have. I have been looking forward to this for quite a while. And fun fact for friends, I think I probably have to fact check this, but I think today's guests have actually been collectively on my shows the most of any guests. I'm pretty sure. You guys have been on both of my shows quite a few times and like original guests, like way back in the day, even in the early days of the Intermittent Fasting podcast, we had you guys on that show back when I was hosting it with Jen Stevens. And back then what we loved and still loved is just how you have such a comprehensive dietary agnostic almost approach to the dietary warfare world, and how you really understand that different diets work for different people. And we had quite a few episodes on digestion with you guys, and on this show as well, on the Biohacking Podcast. So I was super excited. And then before that, then I don't know if I even said your names yet. I'm here with Matt Gallant and Wade Lightheart, who I always want to call Wade Lightyear, but I will not make that mistake. I actually had the wonderful pleasure of meeting both of you in person last year at Dave Asprey's Biohacking Conference. So that was super exciting as well. I love when I get to meet people in real life. But the topic of today's show, so Matt and Wade have an epic new book, friends. Oh my goodness. Okay, so it is very appropriately titled. It's called The Ultimate Nutrition Bible. It really, really is that. The subtitle, Easily Create the Perfect Diet That Fits Your Lifestyle, Goals, and Genetics. And this book, friends, I mean, it really could be the masterclass end resource for all questions you have about different diets, about how to actually diet and lose weight, about how to pursue and apply proper nutrition, how to support digestion. It's got a whole section about genetics, which they even say in the book that they only kept in like 50% of what they wanted to have in, which makes me wonder what the original like non-edited version of this book looked like. And you can use it as a weight because it's so big and it's in hardcover and it's beautiful. So I have so many questions. I am so excited about this conversation. Matt and Wade, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. It's great to be back.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Oh, and you guys run Bioptimizers, which my audience and my friends are major fan of you guys for so long. They've been taking your supplements for years and years. So thank you for that as well. So, okay, to start things off, trying to decide, because I just feel like you guys are so familiar with my audience and likewise, but I know there's probably a lot of people here as well, and it's been a while. So before we dive actually into the book, do you guys want to both briefly tell like a short background of how you both individually got interested in nutrition and diet and how you met?
Sure. So I did my first diet when I was 15. Came home from school one day. My uncle told me I was fat. It hurt me, pissed me off. So I got on the Atkins diet, started jogging, and I went from 190 to 147 in 6 months. Then I felt weak and scrawny, especially one day after I went to the beach and I saw these two big bodybuilders. So I got obsessed with bodybuilding, started training 12 times a week. Did what's called the anabolic diet, which was written by Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale. It was a cyclical ketogenic diet. You would carb load on the weekends, be ketogenic during the week. Went from 147 to 235. So that worked well. Fun fact, the first time I ever saw Wade was the night that I competed, the only time I ever competed in bodybuilding. I was 19 and I was in the juniors. Wade won the show. We didn't talk that night, but we did see each other and he was memorable. And then fast forward a couple years later, we were both really successful trainers. I was a trainer at the gym where his mom worked out and Wade came back to visit his parents. We just struck up a friendship and then I moved to Vancouver. We were two of the busiest trainers in World's Gym downtown Vancouver. And Wade was winning national natural bodybuilding championships as a vegetarian, which was really weird and unusual. So we decided to start a business and market what Wade was doing, and it was successful. And then in 2014, we rebranded to Bioptimizers because really at this point in our journey, we're more obsessed and focused on health than bodybuilding. But I'll pass it to Wade to share his story.
Yeah, I got started when I was a teenager, trying to gain some muscle. My sister was dying of cancer, and I realized that your health and your life isn't a guarantee. And I had a kind of a very narrow version of, well, if I had all these muscles that I saw in bodybuilding magazines, then maybe I could be healthier or more vibrant. And then when she passed away, it was my first year at university. I studied exercise physiology at the University of New Brunswick and began on a quest about, well, how do you build muscle? How do you build health? How do you build strength? And I was frankly unimpressed with my university education. I felt it was very compartmentalized. It served as a good background, anatomy, physiology, biology, all those sort of components. But when I would ask my professors like deep questions on performance and stuff, they really didn't have the answer. So I went on a quest and started looking at people who were producing results while also competing. And I have terrible genetics. I should never have been in a bodybuilding contest in my life. But I loved the sport. To me, it was an expression of art. And it was also a really cool thing where you could run a lot of experiments and actually see the N of 1 result. And, N of 1, and when that means is just you yourself, gets a bad rap in today's world of double-blind, peer-reviewed periodicals. But, over the last 4 years, the cat's out of the bag. Many of those institutions have been politicized or corrupt, or the findings from it really don't apply to the individual, or the conclusions they derive take so long to get there, you don't have time to wait for those new conclusions. But there is an emerging group, and was back then in the bodybuilding world, which was the original biohackers, and that has now translated into the biological optimization community. I do have a little point on biohackers that I think, a hack is very much like a bodybuilder taking a shortcut. You don't know what the consequences are, where an optimizer is more someone who is, factoring as many factors as possible to get the desired outcome. And so for me, going along with my competitive career, as Matt indicated, I had some success on that level. But I got into the holistic health clinic in Vancouver simultaneous to my, the pinnacle of my bodybuilding career. And I found that many of the insights that you had on the high performance side also had insights for people who were struggling with a variety of conditions. And then the whole diet thing was always fascinating to me because really dietary strategy was solved by bodybuilders and fitness competitors decades ago. And yet I continued to see the diet guru versus diet guru and diet theory versus diet theory. And so many people would come to myself and it would come to Matt and they would say, well, so-and-so says I should be on the keto diet. And so-and-so says I should be on a raw food diet. And of course, him and I argued back and forth because I was a raw food guy. He was a keto advocate. And yet we knew that there were people that didn't respond to those diets for a variety of reasons, notwithstanding psychological, emotional, spiritual, and religious components, which, maybe variants to genetics. And then genetics came into play and epigenetics came into play. And so the individual gets exposed to so much information, they get analysis paralysis. And we decided that we wanted to solve that once and for all by extracting the gold nuggets and commonalities between what makes dietary success, but relative to the goal, the outcome, and sustainability. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have adherence, if you don't have a clear goal, and if you don't have adherence to the strategy that's going to allow you to achieve that goal, then it's not the right diet for you. And so many people don't take that into consideration in their long-term results. And we really believe that that's one of the major obstacles why so many people struggle to be healthy, to live their best life. And yet there's an emerging group of people who are just absolutely killing it and taking apart those things to provide those insights for people.
I love this conversation so much. You mentioned how you had, terrible genes and should never have been a bodybuilder. It just reminded me of one of the things I read in the book, which was actually very freeing and eye-opening. And it was in the genetics chapter. And you talk about how there's all these different genes that people can have that, can set them up to be a certain way. But you say something about how like don't freak out. I'm paraphrasing, but basically don't panic. You don't have horrible genes, like actually horrible genes, because if you did, you wouldn't be here. I was like, oh, that's actually really, really true. I like that. I'm going to keep that going forward. But going back to all of the dietary wars and all the things, I'm trying to decide which direction to take this. It's so, so true about the dietary warfare. And I was telling you beforehand when we were talking that I'm developing a dating app, for example, and it involves food. And we sat down, we were trying to find like the one food that would be like the universal icon. And we're like, there is none. Like there's like water. Like water is I think the only thing people agree on. And not even that if you're like dry fasting.
I actually did a lot of research in water. I've experimented with 160 plus different water systems. And when you get into water, there's a water war as well. So any field that you get into, you start running into this whole aspect. And you have to, I think it's a good caveat in this. I want to put on this because there's a perspective piece that everybody needs to take into consideration. And that is, number one, none of us know everything. Number two, every expert is operating within a limited field of awareness and a certain level of expertise. And oftentimes when they're explaining things, they're relying on generalizations in order to explain conceptual components. At best, 80% of that applies to the individual. And the difference between being successful on your diet and being unsuccessful in your diet is in that 20% individualization. And that's where people are getting it wrong.
That really makes sense. And I was talking with you guys before this as well, how in the holistic paleo world that I come from, even biohacking a bit, there's all this focus on health, which is super important. But there's also often a focus on looking at food quality and maybe fasting and when you eat and when you don't eat. But they often shy away from having a actual like dietary protocol to follow that is so representative, I think, in the bodybuilding world that you guys come from. And it's almost a little bit judgmental, I think. I mean, maybe I'm just seeing it from my perspective, but it's kind of like, oh no, like don't diet, don't go on a diet. Really, it's not about that, or, it's not about calories. It's about insulin. It's about carbs instead. There's just all these different ideas. And then I just find it really interesting, and I'm talking all over the place right now, but you guys actually in the beginning of the book, you talk about the different goals that you have that people can have when it comes to dieting. And there's like a judgment surrounding some of those goals and not others, which if you step back, I don't really know why that is, because in the end, it's all about people doing what makes them happy. But people will judge, for example, if your goal is aesthetic, that's like not okay, but it's okay if your goal is like athletic performance. So what are your thoughts on this idea of the goals that we're pursuing, the judgment surrounding it? And is it okay to actually like follow a diet purely for a specific goal that may seem superficial to other people?
Yeah, for many reasons. And I laughed because, again, I got caught up in a lot of those theories, the insulin theory of obesity and all of these things. And fortunately, we've overcome them. And just to cover a few basic things that are related to your question. One is if you get your body fat percentage into the optimal range, not into a competitive, your super lean cut or shredded range, but a healthy range, an optimal range for you, your health will tend to improve. Your biomarkers will tend to improve. The same thing is true for building lean muscle mass. We know that it is one of the most important variables for longevity, for blood sugar management. So those objectives, whether it's building lean muscle mass or losing body fat to get into range, and ideally then maintaining that range for the rest of your life, are very supportive of health, of longevity, health span, lifespan. And I think that's really important because a lot of people will eat a lot of quote unquote healthy food, might be nutrient rich, but maybe they're overeating it and they're gaining body fat. That's totally doable on any type of diet. Some diets might be a little bit easier than others, but one of the things we wanted to emphasize in the book is that calories in, calories out is real. And there's two camps in that world. One is, the hardcore calories in, calories out group, which is, it's just the laws of thermodynamics, which is true. And then there's another camp, which is believing in, no, there's these magic variables that make calories in, calories out obsolete, which is not accurate. There are variables that will dramatically change your calorie expenditure. For an example, building lean muscle mass is quite possibly the number one thing that can help you burn more calories, not just from the workout itself, but from the protein synthesis, from the lean body mass building that occurs, it requires a tremendous amount of calories. And that's one of the reasons why bodybuilders are able to get so lean for competitions, far leaner than most, let's say, endurance runners or people doing a lot of cardio. So again, these are tools. There's a lot of other ways you can increase your metabolism, whether it's improving your mitochondrial health, sleeping better. If you sleep better, you will tend to, produce more growth hormone, more testosterone, which will help you burn more body fat. We're talking about cold exposure, which can help you, again, increase your calorie expenditure. So there's a lot of ways to, slice the onion, so to speak. And I think looking at all of those, and we have a whole chapter on it called Optimized Metabolism that covers that, is a better way of just looking at calories in, calories out. And on the calories in part, one of the things that Wade and I are big proponents of is increasing your protein and increasing your fiber are probably the two easiest ways to improve everything. We know that if you increase your protein, your net calories will be decreased by 25 to 30% with your protein intake, meaning that your body has to burn 25 to 30% of that protein intake just to break it down and digest it. And then I'm going to pass it on to the fiber king, which is Wade T. Lightheart, to talk about fiber and all the other aspects of this question.
Yeah. So when it comes to achieving your ideal shape, you can break it down to a couple of unique factors. There's the calories you can consume. Then there is your metabolism, how much you're burning. Okay. And oftentimes the calories, the dietary strategy that people are using is actually lowering metabolism. And you want to invert that. You want to increase your metabolism relative to your calories. So if your strategy is too aggressive, if it doesn't have long-term adherence, right? So can you live with the diet that you are following? If you can't adhere to that, you're dead in the morning. And if you're trying to train your way out of it with, endless hours of cardio, which oftentimes depletes your metabolism, then you got an issue. So what is the biggest factor in dietary adherence? Satiety. Satiety is a fancy word for not being hungry. Hunger, and we go into this with the extensive hunger that you have to go through. And both Matt and I have gone through extensive dietary periods where we suspended our body's natural appetite and we ran into serious metabolic problems because of it, and took us a while to correct out of it. And a lot of people who become very successful in a diet actually are setting themselves up for failure. Too aggressive, too quickly, too much exercise with insufficient calories, or they're using the willpower drill and their diet isn't creating satiety. And so eventually the hunger hormones take over, and then you're just running the calorie roller coaster at that point and usually gain up more weight. And that's where the world is right now. The people who diet now, I think the average person's been on 5 or 6 different diets in their lifetime already. And since the dietary concept really started to emerge in the late 70s, particularly, we've had a steady incline of people getting fatter and fatter and more out of shape and more healthy, and life expectancies going down. And then there's a small margin that we integrated before who are getting bigger, faster, stronger, more lean, better looking, super healthy, living longer. And so you want to understand the variance between the strategies deployed in those two things. And that's what we really illustrate in the book, so that you can craft the perfect diet for you right now, that you can easily adhere to it. And fiber is, I think, the unrecognized superstar in the room. Virtually most of the population does not get sufficient amount of fiber, nor do they get the different types of fiber, which have extremely powerful longevity parameters. There was a meta-analysis I posted on our website not that long ago in regarding to the different types of fiber, and it can improve your life expectancy by 12 to 35%. And that's on an all causes mortality chart. So why wouldn't you incorporate these things? And I use fiber because I'm on a plant-based diet. I use fiber to offset my lack of protein. If I was on a carnivore diet, I'm getting lots of protein and maybe a little fiber. And so I'm trying to offset those two things. And I use fiber as a way to feel satiated because I have a gene that actually leads me to overeat. My body doesn't my body doesn't naturally feel satiated easily. So I have to eat either high amounts of protein or high amounts of fiber. And on a plant-based diet, it's hard to get that much protein in the system. So I offset it with upping my fiber, and then I'm good if I do those two things. But it took me years to figure that out.
I'm super curious, Wade, because you said you first came to bodybuilding, with this idea that muscle would be important for your longevity and the importance of health. And then Matt a second ago was talking about, the importance of anabolism and supporting muscle and all of this journey. Bodybuilders, what is their life expectancy, and do they have reduced life expectancy, bodybuilders?
The life expectancy of bodybuilders is not that good. There's a reason for that. Most high-level amateurs and most professionals augment their diets with hormones, steroids, insulin, growth hormone, a wide variety of anti-catabolic thyroid medications, painkillers, you name it. If you walk into, and one of the reasons I retired, my first retirement was in 1998 after I went to the national championships. And I recognized that in order to be successful as a bodybuilder, not only do you have to have the right genetics and the right training, you need to have the genetic capacity to survive this sheer amount of drugs that you were going to do in order to do that. Now, that's not a condemnation on bodybuilders because a lot of the longevity science has actually come out of what bodybuilders were doing to preserve muscle and to optimize their hormone therapy, which is what a lot of people in the anti-aging market are now doing. So the bodybuilders on the extreme level were like Formula One car drivers. Formula One car drivers are taking extreme risks driving a car at the high levels of performance, and then the engineers engineer technology that can be applied to your daily driver. So their extremeness makes the world a better place. But if you look at, say, and the other thing is I do believe that a lot of bodybuilders have consumed high amounts of protein, and undigested protein in the intestinal tract, I think, is a contributor to a lot of different conditions. And if you're doing this over, not over 10 years or 20 years, you're doing this over 40, 50 years, the benefits of the cosmetic benefits of the bodybuilding diet are offset by the physiological detriments of that. And so what I was trying to look at was, how do I find a happy medium between performing at a high level, but not letting that high level exceed my capacity for living a healthy life? And we broke down in the book 5 different categories. And the reality is if you're deciding that athletic dominance or high performance in a physical field is your number one goal, and that is for a large amount of people, then you are going to make sacrifices on the longevity side in order to hit that higher arc. It's like the candle that burns twice as bright, lasts half as much. That's a consequence that, when they interviewed all of the Olympic athletes after the Dublin inquiry, when, the Ben Johnson affair or whatever, and they asked them, okay, if you knew that you could take a drug, not get caught, and that you would be guaranteed of winning a gold medal, but had a 95% of chance of dying in 5 years, would you do it? And it was an extraordinary, it was like way over 80% of those athletes said that they would. That's the mindset of someone who wants to be world-class, to be a world champion. So I think that's not a mindset that the average person has. I think most people just want to be fit or be healthy or be thing. But when you get bitten by those bugs, you're going to calibrate towards those objectives and strategies that it's going to allow you to get there.
Just add one little thing on top of everything we had said. When you're 300 pounds, which some of these pro bodybuilders are, some are even heavier, even though the majority of that is lean muscle mass, that produces an incredible strain on the heart and other organ systems. So on top of all the drugs and all the things they do. And in our other book, From Sick to Superhuman, we talk about the difference between optimization and maximization, and what Wade was illustrating, talking about athletic performance or peak athletic performance or peak muscle mass or peak getting shredded. That is the maximization game. And you start paying the price on the health side.
The protein piece, I thought it was really interesting what you said in the book about the prevalence of, I forgot the word for it, the accumulation of proteins.
In the supercentenarians.
What was the word for it?
Well, it's protein agglomeration in the cells. Basically, undigested protein inside your body is incredibly toxic and dangerous. Let's start by talking about leaky gut. What is leaky gut and why is that so problematic? Well, typically there's essentially holes in the intestinal lining and the junctions where protein molecules and other undigested food can get into your bloodstream. I mean, the worst case scenario is your body generates an allergic reaction. And that's literally what an allergic reaction is. It is a protein that your body recognizes as a threat and tries to fight back. Now, those are acute problems with undigested protein, but currently one of the hypotheses on why people that are 100 plus pass away is that there's been this long-term protein accumulation in the cells that make the cells stop functioning properly. And I do think that's probably where fasting and autophagy plays a big role. It helps your body clean some of those things. Taking enzymes on an empty stomach, I think, helps clean some of those things. So there's things I think we can do to counteract that. But you want to make sure you're breaking down your protein into amino acids, which is, again, what enzymes do.
Yeah. And so then it comes back to, it's always like you can't win because there's this focus on, protein and the major importance of protein for muscle and longevity and satiety and all the things. But then also, you have to make sure you're actually digesting the protein because too much is, an issue. So there's never an easy solution.
I want to comment on that. And here's that you actually illustrated something that we address in the book. And that is, you can't achieve all the goals that you want simultaneously. And I think people want everything and they want it all right now. You've got to look at your dietary strategy over the course of a lifetime. So the early part of your life, you want to build as much muscle as possible. So focusing on weight training exercises, building as much muscle mass when you're in an optimal hormonal state, and maybe over-reliance on protein at that stage because that helps you achieve your muscle building and aesthetic goals, probably okay. Then as you get into middle age, you're going to move to likely a more performance diet, whether that's a performance diet relative to your work or your family responsibilities, or if you happen to be fortunate, like I was, my athletic and business career kind of tied together. And so I was looking at that point, and that you had to move to a situation where you're emphasizing cardiovascular health. You're looking at longevity parameters. And then somewhere along that line, you're making a decision, am I going to use, bioidentical hormones to augment a diminishing hormonal supply? I've been able to kick that can down the road. I haven't done that, but I know that for some people, that's going to be the difference maker in quality of life. So when you look at the goals, do you need to build muscle? Do you need to lose weight? Are you looking to dominate in performance? Do you need your brain operating at like world-class levels because your life is dependent on how your brain thinks? Or are you choosing longevity? And most people will look at aesthetics on the first side of life, performance on the second part, and then everybody gets to, how do I maintain and save or improve my health as the ravages of aging start to show the toll on you.
And speaking of goals, so something I loved in the book and I got so excited about because this is how I function so much. And I think there is a big misconception here in the world. So you talk about the role of dopamine in goals. And what I find so interesting about the concept of dopamine and goals is I feel like there's this narrative out there that So basically, there's this idea that if we have a goal, we're going to achieve it, and then it's not going to feel as good as we think, or it'll be a momentary high, and then we just won't feel satisfied. And the idea there is that, that we need to find ourselves and find our purpose somewhere else and not have a focus on these goals. It's a more esoteric, psychological, you need to meditate type response. Whereas the way I see it is, I understand that. I get a goal, I get dopamine, it feels great. And then I'm on to the next goal. And I really enjoy that. I think it's just the best journey ever. And you talk in the book about this importance of basically having a never ending dopamine drip. You got to have the next dopamine drip lined up. And I was like, yes, I love this. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, the role of dopamine and goals.
Yeah. So I'm wired to have above average genetic response to dopamine. I've got very strong dopamine systems, which is very good when I'm doing good things and very bad when I've done bad things. Haven't drank alcohol in 15 years for that reason. So yeah, understanding your dopamine system and understanding how you can generate your own dopamine drip is one of the most powerful things I think anybody can learn. And I would say almost everybody that's super successful that I know has intuitively figured that out for themselves. And let's just talk about what is a dopamine loop? It really starts with deciding what's important to you. As soon as you truly decide internally, not put it on a piece of paper or put it on the wall, but you actually change your core values, you change the ranking of that thing in your own mind and your psyche, and you decide, you know what, this is really, really important. You've just set up the dopamine loop. And as you're moving towards that objective, towards that thing that is important to you, we know that your brain's going to generate more dopamine, which feels good. It makes effort feel pleasurable, as Huberman says very eloquently. And the downside, quote unquote, of dopamine is that when you hit that goal, you will get a big spike, and then you will tend to go below baseline. And the way that feels is you feel a little bit down. It's where's my drive? And a lot of people that have these massive, massive long-term goals, selling a business or weight competing or things like that, once they achieve that thing and they don't have another goal lined up, they tend to feel down, depressed, et cetera. And one of the narratives in the entrepreneurial world has been the second mountain, which is kind of what you're alluding to. However, in our opinion, one of the best ways of constantly being driven and motivated, which is obviously a good thing, is you want to have a sequence of goals. You want to have multiple objectives. And I used to do that as a personal trainer. I rarely lost clients because as we were getting closer to their first goal, I would say, okay, well, let's lose another 10 pounds. And after that, we're going to focus on building some lean muscle mass. So I would be creating these never-ending dopamine loops for them, which keeps them engaged, keeps them motivated, compared to, okay, we hit the goal. Thank you. Good luck. And that's it. And I'm going to pass it on to Wade because I think Wade's bodybuilding journey is a perfect illustration of how to do that tactically, step by step.
Yeah, thanks for that. So just to comment on, when I hear those people, well, it's okay and all that stuff, I call those the mantras of mediocrity. And yeah, that's okay, but that's not, if I go to the doctor and they say everything's normal, I'm terrified. Why? Because in the medical community, normal means that I'm going to be on a disability adjusted life expectancy at 60 years old, and I'm going to be relying on prescription medications and surgeries for the next 20 years of my life. And all causes mortality keeps going up and life expectancy keeps going down because of an over reliance on, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Those mantras are coming out of that field. I don't want anything to do with it. I want to go into those situations if I'm in an emergency situation. I've got a serious diagnosis on an illness. I have a car accident, something going on. For me to echo, so Matt and I have been committed to building this new model, which is the book is essentially a compilation of 20 years of experiments and conversations that we were able to arrive at some common ground to build a new paradigm about health and vitality. And when it comes to dopamine and motivation, we're motivated as entrepreneurs and as business people and as educators because we never lost the value, the feedback biochemical payoff of helping someone else achieve their goals. We discovered that juice back when we were personal trainers, and that juice continues to go to this day. And why we created this company is so we could help millions of people transform their life. And we're well on our way to that goal. And it never gets old, which is a different motivation level than maybe just dopamine alone. There's another biochemical feedback that comes in as a human helping another human. We're social creatures. We feel something when we do that. And that's also a powerful motivation. So some people are motivated by that. For me, when it comes to dopamine, I look at my big, hairy, audacious goal. And that was for me as a 15-year-old kid competing at, the Mr. Olympia, Mr. Universe, owning a nutritional supplement company that sold products around the world, and living in Venice Beach, California, where I got to train next to Arnold Schwarzenegger at Gold's Gym. Those are my goals as a 15-year-old. Now, it took me 33 years to get there. Okay. So how do you stay motivated for 33 years? Well, I would work backwards from each one of those goals. So to just use the bodybuilding timeline, because it was a little easier, I would say, okay, to be at the Mr. Universe, I have to win the national championship. To win the national championship, I have to win the provincial or state championship. To win that, I have to go to the local soul. To win the local soul, I need some muscles. To need some muscles, I need an exercise program. I'm going to need, and it really went back to, I need a gym. I had to build my own gym in a barn because there was no gyms around where I lived, in the woods. So I just broke it down to the point of what could I do today? And then I set myself up is if I adhered to my objectives of that day, I got that dopamine hit. I took a step towards that goal each day. So my measurement I had the advantage of not having social media and all of those external influences, and not having order on Amazon and it comes 3 hours later to your house, all of the instant response mechanisms in today's world, I think makes it a little bit harder for people to think in a long-term format. And so recognizing that I was on the path and kept making adjustments along that path. And it was a long journey. It took me 10 years to win my first show. It took me 16 years to get to my first world championships. It took me 20 years to build essentially a world-class company. So and the outcomes are never as valuable as who you become on the journey. So those goals are merely signposts that set you directionally, and that direction needs to be in line with your values and your emotions. If it is, you're living what I say a compelling life. You're happy about what you're doing, and you wouldn't imagine to be anywhere else, because you're in alignment with your values, and these goals become signposts of, oh, wow, I made that. And so it's a celebration, and I'm just getting started because I've got that next goal, like Matt said, we've got that next goal on the horizon. So, okay, let's progress over there. But I'm always coming back to, at the start of the day, is my daily habits, is my daily routine going in the direction of my goal, or is it hindering me towards the action of the goal? And that becomes a methodology of self-discovery and self-recalibration, and also gives you the humility to go out and get help on the areas, because your results are your results. Your results are a collection of the habits you develop, and the habits you develop are directly proportional to the goals that you set and the adherence to those goals that you have.
One little thing I want to add is we also talk about micro-dopamine loops, really acknowledging the small wins, whether it's, I'll give you an example, a fresh one. A good friend of mine just came to the gym for the first time 2 days ago. It's been a long time. And I just told him, that's a huge win. You're in the gym. And I think a lot of people don't celebrate these small little victories, which is, a great opportunity to experience those little dopamine responses, whether it's you ate the right meal, you lost the pound, you went to the gym, you ran, whatever it is that you're doing, just consciously being grateful, actively appreciating those things is one of the easiest ways to add even a little bit more dopamine and drive to the whole thing. Because I think a lot of people just have these long-term or midterm goals, but having things that you feel you're winning at every day and throughout the day, and Wade can attest, we hang out a lot, and I'll often say, hey, we're winning. That is me acknowledging in that moment that whatever we're doing is a victory. And, it just helps you stay motivated and driven, helps you feel better in the moment. So I just wanted to add that.
When I was reading that whole chapter, I was like, in my notes, I have like written so many times, it's like, this is me. But I got really excited because I just feel like it's a system and approach to life that, it works so well for me. And I just want everybody to experience it or understand it. So friends, definitely check out the book because there's so much more on it. Like some of the other things you talked about with it was like the dopamine and noradrenaline dance, and how, you can really do when you're in really intense hard situations, how your noradrenaline goes up and you can actually combat that with dopamine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was one of the most powerful insights I heard from some of the early Huberman podcasts. And just to give everybody the science, the molecule that causes animals to quit during physical exertion is noradrenaline. In other words, once noradrenaline, which will get stimulated during times of stress, gets too high, people just quit. And the antidote or the solution is generating dopamine, which then pushes down that noradrenaline and allows people to keep going well past the point of physical discomfort. And as a teenager, when I got into bodybuilding, there was a bodybuilder named Tom Platz, and he had the freakiest legs that had ever been built. And still to this day, one of the greatest legs of all time in the world of bodybuilding. And he was known for pushing himself to levels of effort that maybe no other human has ever gone to. He was famous for squatting 425 pounds for 24, 25 reps. Like nobody's been able to recreate a lot of his achievements and feats. And when you hear him talk about what he was doing mentally, he was creating these micro-dopamine loops during his sets. And he's famous for just 5 more reps. So he would break down his sets into 5 more reps. So literally during a set, he's creating this micro-dopamine loop of, okay, I'm just going to do 5 more reps. And he does, when he gets to 5, he does it again. And he keeps going and going until his body just can't anymore. And Wade, maybe you've got some other examples. And David Goggins is probably one of the more well-known recent examples, but Wade, maybe you know some other people that are known for that.
Yeah. So what Matt's illustrating is how do people get to extraordinary levels of performance, the superhuman level of performance. The Navy SEALs talk about the values and identifications that they have. Like, one of their mantras is the harder it gets, the better we like it. So how you define adversity often indicates the level of adversity that you can handle. That's what builds resilience. And if there's anything I would say that is common, and I am fascinated with high performance athletes. I always have been, because what is it that makes a person? We used to watch the Olympics from the time I was a little kid and just celebrate these people who are just pushing the human body beyond comprehension. And what can we learn from it? And for me, I can speak to this directly. To build an extraordinary level of muscle beyond your, walking around or living or something, especially if you have lousy genetics like myself, it's really hard. And so you have to develop a different relationship with pain. So I learned from Arnold Schwarzenegger that pain was pleasure. Like pain meant that I was going to get my goal. So when I start redefining the things that that I don't want to embrace through that value system of, now that it's the harder it gets, the better we like it. These type of psychological tricks, these become self-fulfilling prophecies to access our inner pharmacy. So if we look at the placebo effect, right, which is very legitimate and oftentimes outperforms, the pharmacological effects in studies. Well, what is working there? What's working there is the absolute belief that what you're taking is working, which is in alignment with your values. Well, what is the mechanism that allows that to work? Is that you have an inner pharmacy in your own body that you can access. In what every single high performance person does is they access their inner pharmacy in a way that puts them in a positive state. And I would also, my partner, she's studying her PhD in psychology. So we have a lot of conversations around neurochemistry and neurophysiology. Matt and I participate in brain optimization components, and we're fascinated with the whole aspect of neurophysiology and neurochemistry. Well, right now there's a common element to kind of play to a victim type mentality across the world. And I believe that is the actual inverse of leveraging your inner pharmacy in a negative way. Oh, everybody in our family is big boned. We never been able to lose weight. Oh, diabetes or cardiovascular disease runs in my life. Therefore, I better not go to the gym. I better not push myself. I might take a jam or I might have a stroke. Very seldom are those things actually legitimate. But when you keep canonizing it in your speech and your identity, you're adhering to a philosophy of less than. And yet there's people who have all those conditions that have a shift in their perception and then achieve high levels of health and vitality. So what's changed? What changed is their values. What changed is their musts. What changed was their reasons why. And the reason those things work is because you start leveraging these neurochemicals, which are explained by guys like Huberman really well. But you don't have to know all the terminology to study the patterns of success. So if you're struggling with something in your life, whatever it is, gaining weight or building muscle or, being a world-class person at something, you got to go there. You got to find examples of people who are more or less like you that overcame the same challenges that you wanted to overcome, and building in their values, their goals, their strategies. They're like borrowing off those and applying them in your own life to access your inner pharmacy of performance.
I love that so much. I've never heard that term before, inner pharmacy. I'm going to stick with that. And thank you for commenting on the victimhood epidemic today is, that's a whole soapbox that we could go on, but it really, I just think it takes away so much from people when it comes to personal agency and the changes that they can make in their life. And there's just so much potential for people.
Yeah. One comment on that.
Yeah, please do.
The reality is on a certain level, we're all victims and we're all perpetrators, depending on what scale that you're looking at. For example, everybody listening to this podcast or everybody that has a cell phone is essentially a perpetrator of really unfortunate things in third world countries where people are getting lithium batteries or things like that, right? So does that make you a perpetrator? Yes, it does. So should you feel bad about that, or should you work on making the world a better place? There are also probably areas in everybody's life where they did get slighted. They did get a raw deal. It didn't work out for them. They didn't get the right genetics or the right economic situation or the right social situation. And so in that case, you're a victim of those circumstances. Is that going to help you achieve your goals? It's not. Nor is it beating yourself up because you have that phone. Now, there are people that are going to take up those causes and very well glad that they're doing that to bring awareness about, moving to, a more sane society. But when you're using whatever your current life situation as a crutch, then that's not something that leads to a society that's healthy, happy, and living their best life. It's a society that's set up to rely on other people to alleviate your own shortcomings. And that's not sustainable over time. So when people talk about sustainable living, sustainable weight, sustainable health, sustainable lifestyle, it's all gobbledygook if you're not taking personal accountability about the things that you can control and accepting the things that you can't.
Yeah. And actually probably a great example really relevant to this conversation would be, it can be pretty easy to blame the processed food industry for the obesity epidemic, because these foods are arguably engineered to hack our dopamine system, our reward system, taste amazing, be high calorie, hyper palatable.
Low satiety.
Yes. So all the things, it's all stacked against you. So it completely makes sense why we are eating them and having an obesity epidemic. At the same time, you still have agency, and to that point, you actually talk in the book about like the guy who did the Twinkie diet, for example, and lost weight. So actually, you actually even could eat the foods and lose weight if you implemented enough calorie restriction with it, I suppose. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the book is that section where we talk about starvation survival mechanisms. And if I was to summarize the reasons for the obesity epidemic, it's the perfect storm of ancient genetic wiring, which has one objective: survive. And we're on some level, almost all of us are programmed to overeat when we're exposed with food. I mean, that's how our ancestors made it to this point. Second, you have, again, everything you just mentioned, chemically engineered, scientifically engineered food that is calorie dense, nutrient deficient, optimized for low satiety, and hyper palatable. And then on top of all that, we have incredibly easy access, easier than ever. I can pull up my phone right now, go to Uber Eats and order 10,000 calories of food that's going to be in my doorstep in 30 minutes. And it is that simple, at least in my mind. Yeah, there's psychological reasons, of course, and all of these other aspects. But if I was to summarize the perfect storm that has led us to this obesity epidemic, that is it. And the question is, well, what can we do about it? I do think that, and this is going to be a hot take, that the GLP-1 agonist it's a very powerful route to help overcome this genetic wiring of let's overeat when we have the opportunity to do. And we're seeing the success of it. The challenge or the downsides are, other than the side effects, when people stop, they tend to go back. And a lot of people are not learning the right habits, learning how to eat properly, adding enough protein, adding enough fiber, exercise, all of the things that creates the environment for lifelong success. So that's the downside. But I do think in a perfect world, if there was a genetic upgrade that people could do one time and completely recalibrate their hunger response when they eat, we would see probably the end of obesity. And if you look at the stats, only 3% of people make it long term. And I think that 3% are the people that are blessed with a very good dopamine system, which allows them to be driven and motivated. And I think all three of us have that. But I do feel a lot of empathy and compassion for the 97% that are clearly struggling and haven't been able to make it so far.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting in the book how you basically had a thesis that if we can take away something from GLP-1, it shows that, reducing hunger clearly has a massive effect on effectiveness, for weight loss and things like that. Yeah, I'll be really curious the future of that, like if we see more intense long-term side effects or not. It's definitely the thing everybody's talking about right now. I find it really interesting. There's all this, I don't know if it's drama, but I've heard on different podcasts like Rogan and stuff where they talk about different companies responding to the GLP-1 thing. Basically, they're concerned about it affecting sales for like processed foods and stuff, which is interesting.
It's a huge deal. So there was a book back in the that was written called Eric Schlosser's Fast Food Nation. And it's a recommended reading for people to understand what happened. If you look back to the photos of people in the 70s or 50s or 30s or whatever, you do not, like, you take a picture of a beach in Santa Monica in 1970, you take a picture of that beach in 2000, you take a picture of that beach now. What changed? Like a level of obesity and the pervasiveness of that is widespread. And Eric Schlosser, in his book Fast Food Nation, identified the food chemists that started to hook people on what appeared to be nutrient-dense food by using chemical replacements that increased the amount of consumption of foods. So what happened is we went from the food companies recognized the cost of customer acquisition was much higher than getting their customers to order more product. So they created these chemicals to mimic, key nutrients in the brain so that we would consume more of them. And that's when we went into the super sizes and the big bags of chips and the giant sodas and et cetera, et cetera. And that's gone on. And now we're starting to see, the size of popcorn and soda you get in a movie theater now is not what it used to be. And I'm really upset about that personally, but because again, I don't have that satiety gene. So when I have my feasting day where I get to have whatever I want the biggest size of everything. If they serve my popcorn in a pail, or in a, if they had a size that was like a 50-gallon barrel, I'd buy it. I would. I just think of, the biggest is the best. The most is the best. It's the best value. It's the most satiating. If I don't eat it all, it's probably a better deal. And I'd rather have that than to run out is in my brain. But understanding that, we are living in a world where those chemicals are floating around in a lot of these foods. And interesting enough, one of the common elements of most dietary experts from a health and longevity, those are two components that I'm going to caveat in there, is that they're saying eat real whole foods. Why? Well, real whole foods have less pesticides, less herbicides, less hormones, less flavor agents, less preservatives, and less flavor enhancers that lead to, impulsive or compulsive eating. So we're eliminating all of those unseen boogeymen that is taking you out of your system. And, I just had a friend recently, to echo this point. He's always struggled with maintaining his weight. And he got some health tests recently that were very dire. And I said, I sat down with him and I said, listen, this is a life and death situation. And if you don't get this right, you're not going to make it. That's what these parameters. And his medical doctor, actually, when she got him, she's a friend, was literally crying when she saw the results. And so I said to him, I said, look, I can, the guy also happens to be a vegetarian. He's got a Hindu background. So he doesn't want to violate the tenets of his religious and spiritual beliefs, which is another thing that we put in there inside our hierarchy of nutritional values. So I said, look, here's the issues that you have. You don't have enough protein inside your diet, as many vegetarians struggle with. We're going to boost that up. We're going to increase the fiber because, you're running this horrible blood sugar cycle. They also pre-diabetic. And I said, if you follow this strategy that I've used for success in bodybuilding, success in longevity, you're going to see a correction. There's going to be an adjustment phase of 21 days as your body switches from carbohydrate metabolism and riding that roller coaster of blood sugar. As that stabilizes, you're going to see your hunger go down. You're going to see your moods go stabilize. And you're going to start seeing productive results as your body switch to, more fat metabolism as opposed to, being a fat storing machine. I chatted with him last night. It's been 3 weeks. He's followed the thing clearly. He went through those early fluctuations at the first part of the first 2 weeks. And then he's like, oh my God. He goes, I've done it all this week. And he goes, I actually like this. I feel really good. I didn't know it could be that easy. So most people are one or two little tweaks away from long-term adherence to the diet strategy they've employed. They're just missing these points. And we cover them all in the book.
I was having this epiphany while reading the book. And again, while you sharing that just now, which is that I'm like you, Wade. I'd have to check my genes. I don't know if I have the same genes that you're talking about, but I just love food and eating. And I literally could just eat like constantly. And I would if I could.
Me too. Matt likes eating too. We're all confirmed foodies. That's why we're so fascinated with diets.
Yes. Okay. Same. And what I realized is I have implemented two of these actually that you talk about in the book, actually all of them. I found the system that works for me that allows me to still experience that without the negative ramifications and for it to be sustainable for me. And so what I do is not what everybody should do, which is kind of like the thesis of this, or the, the theme of all of this, which is find what works for you. But like for me, so I do daily fasting. So then I'm fasting during the day and then I'm eating at night and I get to not have to limit myself while I'm eating. And then those actual food choices. So I do, whole foods, high protein, high fiber. And I do either low fat or low carb, depending on what I'm feeling that night. Normally it's low fat, high carb. What I do, and I was so excited to read this in your book, is I eat basically the same foods. And I'm so happy existing within a relatively limited choice of foods. And I'm dying to hear you guys elaborate on this a little bit, because I feel like I am able to get all the nutrients I need by existing within a world of, again, a very limited menu, but it's, steak and chicken and fish. It's like meats. And then I love cucumbers and like fruit. I don't like vary it up. I don't try different things. Like I'm very happy with what I eat. So what are your thoughts on eating the same things over and over again?
So if you look at the bodybuilding world, why is every single fitness competitor and every single bodybuilder able to get into a body fat level that is lower than most people will ever achieve in their lifetime, even at a local show? Like the worst bodybuilder or fitness competitor on a stage is in better shape than almost everybody in the real world. Well, we can learn something from them. One thing is they cultivate a dietary strategy that is based on keeping their muscle mass and losing their body fat, which are two really important factors that people are struggling with in the modern world. So we can learn from that. And they tend to pick 12 at max, 12 winning meals. And for myself, I would pick 5 meals. And, for example, I did the world championships a little over a year ago. And at my age, in my 50s, I had to diet 18 months to get into the type of condition that I wanted to show up at a world championship level. That's, a very elite company. And so I just ate the same things every day for 18 months and was fine. And going back to that earlier conversation, a dopamine loop, every time I had a meal, every time I got through a day, I saw that as a win because I was really focused on that goal. And, I had to win some shows to get there and all that sort of stuff. But that was the key element. And here's a fascinating statistic. The average person only has 25 meals that they go to in general. But the idea of novelty is a really big factor. Well, I get to eat anything they want. If they actually look at what they eat, it's about 25 meals is what they have in general over the course of a 30-day calendar period. And they probably repeat most of those frequently. Unfortunately, of those 25 meals, most of them don't fit within any kind of calorie strategy that you are essentially, you basically, those 25 meals have proven one thing, that they don't work for you. And so you need to calibrate 25 other meals. And the less variance you have, the easier it is. And I want to turn this, and one of the strategies also that I employ now that I'm not competing right now is I do fasting one day a week. So I fast, I start in the evening one day, I go the whole next day, and then I break my fast next morning. So it's about 40 hours for me. And then I have one day, usually during UFC events, because when the adrenaline flows from UFC and I'm in a social situation, both of those things trigger my eating, my manic eating response. So I have all the no foods on that day with my friends, and I love the social thing, and as I like to say, pigging out and just really enjoying all the forbidden foods, so that I feed that satiety, that little mechanism that wants to go off my diet, the rebel inside me that doesn't want to do those things, that wants to overeat and doesn't care. I get to play that game too. And that's my feasting and fasting strategy. But Matt, he's a novelty guy. He's like literally hardwired opposite to me. He's got to have new foods. Matt, what is it you do, and how do you deal with that novelty demon in your own life? I think that's a valuable piece too.
Yeah. So first of all, I grew up, my parents had the same meals on rotation. It was about a 15-day rotation, but there was lasagna and then there was a seafood. And so I discovered this pretty young that, okay, we're just eating these set meals over and over again. But as Wade mentioned, I have a very strong psychological need for new things, novelty. So I tend to eat the exact same thing 5 days a week. Like right now, I have Collard Genius for breakfast. tend to maybe eat a couple of eggs for lunch. And then I've been having actually a big salad with salmon for dinner, and then some Quest chips, which have incredible macros, as a, early evening snack, and maybe a Quest bar earlier in the day. So I eat that pretty much every day, Monday to Friday. But what I do to, satisfy my need for newness is I'll, eat whatever I want, not however much I want. There's a big difference. And that's a really important point we want to hammer home, is that you can eat whatever you want. However, if you don't want to gain excess body fat, you cannot eat unlimited amounts of it. So that's when I'll go to a new restaurant or order something that's, maybe not as health conscious as I normally do. And that's it. It's really that simple. And just to highlight some of the advantages or, reasons why you want to use what we call the simplest secret. There's nothing more simple than just eat the same thing over and over again. One, and Wade alluded to bodybuilders, one thing that most of them do is meal prep. So it makes meal prep so much easier if you can just prepare a big batch of it, a couple times a week, put it in the fridge, and then pull it out. And it just makes succeeding that much easier. It's easier to eat less at each meal. One of the things that was interesting as I dove into the science of it, people will eat more calories when they eat a wider variety of foods. And that's been scientifically proven. Easier to reduce portions. So let's say at lunchtime, you're eating 3 eggs and it's time to cut your calories. Well, you can go from 3 eggs to 2 eggs. There you go. You just reduce your calories by about 100 calories a day. Or, Stan Efferding's very famous for his vertical diet. And the variable that he manipulates the most is white rice. So when he wants clients to gain weight, he'll increase white rice. And when it's time to diet down, he'll decrease white rice or eat leaner cuts of meat, which is another key strategy. So for an example, let's say you're ketogenic. One of the things you can do to cut calories, which my coach, Kevin Weiss, was a national bodybuilding champion, world record powerlifting holder, he would just go from ribeyes down to skirts, down to leaner cuts. So he'd still be ketogenic, but he would reduce his calories by reducing his fat intake. It reduces decision-making, which is huge. In my opinion, anything you can do to reduce the amount of decisions that you make is a win. Like if every meal you got to think, okay, what am I going to eat? As soon as you ask that question, the odds that you pick the right thing go down significantly. You'll also have less cravings, and it really helps eliminate reactive diet destruction. We all know that, going to the supermarket starving or hungry is a very bad decision. And that's true in your home as well, right? If you're hungry and you don't know what you're going to eat, the odds you grab the wrong thing are much higher.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, just so I'm going to break down the psychological feeling of a dieter going to a restaurant. You go to the restaurant, you're in a social situation, you're trying to adhere to your diet stuff. You do not control of what the kitchen is putting. You don't know the extra oils or extra chemicals or sugar or whatever they're adding to that. You're going through the menu, trying to figure out what's on your diet. And you start to feel the anxiety going, is like, I'm going to blow my diet. This isn't right. I don't like this restaurant. Oh, everybody's staring at me weird. If I order something less, they're going to feel it's a social like you go through that whole computational world, and almost no one has the ability to enter that field repeatedly before they break. So we also talk about strategies of, going to restaurants or social situations or how you manage those, which is just as important for long-term adherence, because, otherwise you get, a downward spiral of the efforts. Oh, I broke my diet. Well, I broke my diet. I might as well go for the dessert. I did that. Well, I might as well have a few drinks. Hell, it's all going to hell in a handbasket this week. I'll restart my diet next Monday and just go off the rails this weekend. You know what I mean? Like, those little breaks in our will by not setting yourself up success do take people out. And we do live in a world that has all these tasty, yummy, high calorie foods, these wonderful restaurants and stuff that you got to do. So you need to be able to put those in their places at the appropriate time with the appropriate strategy preemptively planning for it, because if you don't, the chances of you winning are pretty close to zero.
I just feel like the power of having the system and the plan in place that works for you is ultimately one of the most freeing things, ironically. One of my hacks that I do also when in my eating window, and it's funny because it's actually the opposite of one of the things you recommend, but for a similar reason. So you talk about optimizing your environment and, not following like foodie channels on Instagram and, just not exposing yourself to all of that stimulus that's making you want to eat the food. The way I've hacked it, and I rarely talk about this because I realize it comes off probably as very strange, but it really works for me. So I will not look at like foodie type channels or things like that during my fast or during the day. But I do get a dopamine hit, like looking at these channels, like these cakes and all these things. So what I do is I only look at them during my eating window, and I look at them when I'm eating my dessert, which is my fruit. So basically I get all the dopamine hits of like looking at how they make all these different cakes and all these different things, but I'm eating the fruit, which also gives me all the dopamine. And so that's how I get to like have my cake and eat it too, except not eat it.
Here's how you know you're a masochist, which is something I do. I did a lot of 5-day fasting last year. And on day 4, day 5, I'll do the exact same thing. It's funny because I know some UFC fighters will do that as well. They'll start watching food shows as they're dieting down and cutting weight and all that stuff. And, that is a form of a, dopamine loop, because I know that in 72 hours or 48 or 24 hours, I'm going to actually eat. So I'm kind of building up my dopamine by watching all this stuff. But yeah, it's definitely a masochistic thing to do, but I enjoy it.
Pairing it when you can't eat, that's definitely the masochism. The hack I found was like pairing it while I'm eating. And what's so interesting is I feel like that behavior to a third party probably looks very strange and like restrictive. Like, oh, she won't eat, like she's looking at the cake, but she won't eat it. She'll just eat the fruit. The way my response to that, even though nobody has come up to me and said this to me, this is just what I'm guessing society would think about it. But we don't think it's weird to like watch those shows and eat the food. But if you watch them and don't eat it, now it's weird. So that's just my commentary on that. But yeah, so I'm all about the hacks that work for you individually.
I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum, just to clarify. Like, I remember when I was in my first contest diet, I remember watching it was a Mars bar commercial. It's a Snickers commercial because it was showing like the peanuts falling into the caramel river through chocolate mountains, right? And I was starving. I didn't have the best strategy, but I had a stretch. I was in the will drill strategy back in those days. And I remember watching this and then cultivating this craving for Snickers bars. It's like, I didn't even eat Snickers bars. And I thought that was really unusual. And then I noticed the difference between dieting in a rural area versus a city area. I would have all these weird food cravings when I was dieting in a city area. And then I realized that there were all of these advertisements everywhere in the city that weren't present in the country about different foods that was going into the back of my brain. And being a visually oriented person, I realized that the less I dealt with the external manipulation components of advertising, there's a certain, propaganda was the original form of advertising, is that you're positively promoting your product and service in a light that makes it attractive to certain people's markets. But what's more attractive to our biology than food? Since, not having enough food was the biggest, problem for humans throughout most of human history. So you have to realize that those are stimulating effects. And so for me, I can't do that. But I've known a lot of successful fitness and bodybuilding competitors that's how they get their dopamine loops or their feedback loop or whatever makes them feel happy, by watching cooking shows and, all these sort of things while they're dieting. To me, that's just, I can't imagine doing it. But if that's what works for someone, then you need to know that about yourself and apply it.
I can only do it while I'm eating because otherwise I feel way too deprived. And what's funny about it though is because I eat late at night. So I have like my blue light blocking glasses on. So I look at all these channels, but I can't actually see the real colors that they are because like I only light up my apartment with red and I have on blue light blocking glasses. I like want to know what the cakes actually look like. So I take all these screenshots and I'm like, I'll look at these tomorrow, but I don't because I don't want to look at them when I'm in my fasted state. So I have a very warped image in my head of that whole world. Maybe something to end on because, well, so for listeners, if they like definitely get this book, I can't even express how much information is in this book and plans and science and details and how to actually find the diet that works for you. And they go through all the different types of diets like keto and vegan and raw and paleo and if it fits your macros, all the things. So it is all in there. Something I love that you talk about, reverse dieting, which we didn't even talk about reverse dieting, which I think is really, really important and helpful for people. So definitely check it out for that. But you talk about the role of maintenance for life. And I think we keep coming back to this theme of what is actually sustainable for people. I was wondering if you could just talk briefly about the effort required for initially achieving your dietary and fitness goals and aesthetic goals versus maintaining it, because it's very inspiring, the percent of effort required for maintenance.
Sure. I actually heard Jamie Foxx talk about this in an interview, and he's been obviously incredibly successful at becoming very good in a wide variety of things, from singing to acting to other things. And he talked about, it typically requires only 20% of the effort to maintain something that it does to achieve it. And we see that even in biology, when you look at the science and you see that you can maintain lean muscle mass with about a third of the training volume that it requires to build it, which is encouraging, right? Because that means that, okay, I can set a goal for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months to build lean muscle mass or lose body fat. And once I get there, it still requires some effort. And we talk about the importance of mental vigilance. And I think that's where still having a goal comes into play. Weigh yourself every day. Otherwise, it's all of our, or most of our nature to drift off and start regaining body fat. So you still need some mental vigilance. But I mean, Wade, who's done very strenuous, long dietary weight loss phases, can comment on the effort required compared to just maintaining his body weight.
Yeah, it's light years. Doing a competition is really tough. I think there's a lot of rewards for people to go ahead and do one so that they can learn how much power over their physiology that they have. But when you come off a diet, for me, those disciplinary components, and I see discipline as a positive attribute and not a punitive thing. It's like positive constraints to achieve a desired outcome. It's easy to stay in it, but it's hard work to get there. And when you come off it, what I've created is I created the alert zone. So for me, my ideal body weight is around 183 pounds. Okay, so that's a good point. And I won't get in all the components of lean body mass, but it's a high level of lean body mass, low level of body fat, high functionality cognitively, high functionality VO2 max, basically a ketogenic type blood sugar regulation. That's what's going to be optimal for me. But given my tendencies, if I take a couple weeks off the gas, I'll notice my body weight will drift right up into the low 190s within a couple weeks. Like I'll gain weight that fast. I'll gain body fat that fast. So what I did is I went, okay, my top end of the range is 190. My bottom end of the range, which is in my contest condition, which is around 175 pounds, right? So you basically got about a 7 to 10 point spread. As soon as I hit either one of those zones, I know I'm in the alert zone. So if I'm down in contest diet, I know I can't sustain that for a long time and offset my own, need for food or calorie. I think my optimal health, everybody has a set point of how low their body fat can go. And my body fat I can get it really low, but it's just hard for me to keep it there. Conversely, if it goes up higher really easily, which is not optimal. So as soon as it goes to a certain point, and that's usually the area I have to deal with, I simply go, okay, alert mode. I got to go hyper strict for 2-3 weeks to get myself back into that the zone of success, and then it's easy. So let's say I take a 2-week vacation at my family, which I do every Christmas. I go back there for at least 2 weeks, and my parents don't have any dietary adherence. They and it's Christmas time, and there's a whole bunch of calories. I know going in, I'm gonna take my body fat below my normal set point. I'm gonna go get into the high 170s before I get there. And because I know I'm probably going to come out of it just over top of my ideal weight in the low 190s. I'm going to be in the low 190s. I'm going to have that much of a spread of those 2 weeks. And then when I get back in January, I'm like, okay, January's here. Time to get on the train again. And I'll go for 6 to 8 weeks of consistent dieting to give myself the break on that side. Once I'm here, I get my spike day every week, and I'm able to maintain my body fat levels super easily. So I have a day of spiking, a day of fasting, and every other day is really simple. I eat the same 4 things every day, basically, during the other days.
I'm so curious. The same 4 things?
Yeah, same 4 meals. So I have a protein shake and a little bit of fruit in the morning, and I have my second meal is a big salad with chickpeas. My third meal is either a shake, or if I'm in a rush, I'll take 2 bags of Quest chips. And my evening meal is literally, beans and vegetables. And that's it every single day. And I love it. And I might add a little potato with it sometime if I did extra cardio or extra training, or a little bit of rice on one of those meals, and that's it. And I'm happy with it. It's easy. I don't have to worry about it. And then on, when the Saturday hits, I'm going to eat probably 6,000-7,000 calories on that day and have a great time. And the next week, I'm going to be a half pound leaner than I was the week before.
No, I love hearing that so much. And that was something you talked about throughout the book was, having these mental body fat alarms in place, like having these things in place that let you know when you need to, address things a little bit more tightly and everything. I just love that you guys have provided such a clear, precise system that will actually work for people. And I think it's a nice antidote I think it helps with a lot of the themes that we have today, which well-intentioned, but I think have had such a negative effect on people, which is like, this health at every size movement. So this idea that we can be healthy at every size and shouldn't even worry about weight. And then the whole intuitive eating movement, which again, maybe that works really well for some people, but I think for a lot of people, like they can't just eat because intuitively they would eat all the things because like evolution.
Exactly. We talk about the dietary boogeyman is real. And, Wade and I have been doing this for a long time, and we're not immune to it. So the average person, being able to quote unquote eat intuitively and somehow pull that off is unlikely, very unlikely. I will say, and Wade and I are both big fans of tying subjective experience with objective data. And that's how you can build a better intuitive system. For an example, if you start tracking your sleep, and you wake up and you feel tired, you feel groggy, and you look at your Oura Ring data or Whoop data and you're at 50, 60%, well, you just start learning those, what's happening in your body. And I think that's valuable, but somehow people just magically having intuition, very unlikely. Go ahead, Wade.
I think there's a caveat I want to share to everyone, and they need to accept it. And that is, most of our institutions and research facilities have been coerced and co-opted and compromised, so that the data that we're receiving or the messaging around the data is not really legitimate. And I think that's an extreme disservice to the population in general. And you have to look no further. The food pyramid recommendations, the exercise things, the disability adjusted life expectancy data, if you look at what's happened in the recent years, the institutions that we've relied on for information, it's obvious that they've been co-opted. And it's obvious that the population is getting fatter and fatter and fatter despite trying to diet more and more. And now we're developing these kind of what we call emotionally sensitive messaging to make people feel good about something that they shouldn't feel good about. And there's no advantage to having an unfit. Right now, the American military is got an issue on recruitments because people can't meet the physical requirements to defend the country. Life expectancy has been dropping in the population. All-causes mortality is up. Obesity, which is a driver of every single negative paradigm you could have for life expectancy and quality of life. And yet we're subjected to these mediocre mantra campaigns that, it's okay to be overweight. It's okay. Well, what's the cost to society? What's the cost to your family members? What's the cost of being sick and disabled and not able to work and not able to produce and being a burden to your family and feeling bad about yourself and not looking good and not being able to attract a partner that you want because you don't feel good about yourself? Messaging those people that it's okay to be that way, I think it's a huge disservice. And people can criticize me all they want. They can say, Wade, that's not being sensitive. I think the most insensitive thing that you can do to people is wrapping up BS in a kind package. And that's a bunch of BS. So I'm going to leave with people. Why did we create this book? Why did we cover all the dietary strategies? Why did we reveal the boogeyman that is trying to screw people up? Because frankly, Matt and I were pissed off at good people getting sold bad marketing, bad propaganda on bad data. And despite their best efforts, struggling and then coming to a conclusion where everyone says it's okay, that you're okay where you are. You're not okay because you wouldn't have started it in the first place if you thought you were. And we want to help people get over that hump. We know that we can do it. We know the strategies in the book that can do it. We know for a fact that 99.99% of the people that apply the information in this book will ultimately be successful in the short term, the medium term, and most importantly, in the long term. And we believe that will create a society that will be able to live their best lives, because if you're in a healthy, fit, functional body, your ability to contribute to the world, to your family, to your community is amplified exponentially. And if you don't have those things, it compromises every single aspect of your life and everyone around you at the same time. And frankly, the least selfish thing you could do is get yourself in the best shape possible and run with it. There's a lot of different ways to slice the onion. You can choose it any which way you want. We provide those solutions for you. So we hope that people will take advantage of what we put out here. And we've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of people in every virtual case you can imagine, from teenagers to grandmothers, the whole 9 yards. So you're not so unique that you can't achieve success. And anybody that tells you that is frankly selling you a bill of goods to keep you less than you could be.
That was incredible. That was so amazing. And so now I think listeners can really understand just how incredible this work is that you're doing and this book. So friends, get it now, The Ultimate Nutrition Bible. We will put links to it in the show notes. It is so, so valuable. I can't even express. We just even barely touched on all the things that is in this book. So I just think it will be so helpful for so many people.
Just to jump in too, not only did we write a book that took us 3 years, but we actually spent a week filming all the content. So if you go to ultimatenutritionsystem.com/Melanie, you can get just the book or the book and the entire video course, which is about 25 hours of content. And I do want to highlight that this is a choose your adventure kind of book. Yeah, you can read it cover to cover if you're as passionate about health and nutrition as the three of us are, or you can look at the table of content and jump right to fat loss or muscle building or health or, universal nutritional optimizers. Whatever interests you, jump right to it and put it into your life. With that offer, you also get 3 free cookbooks. You get a carnivore cookbook, a paleo cookbook, and a plant-based superfood cookbook. So we're kind of there to support, whatever dietary philosophy you're following. We also have a reference guide summary. So we have over 750 references in the book. And for those of you that are true science nerds, we basically created a summary of every single reference. And that is an additional bonus that you get. And of course, everything is covered by our unquestionable 365-day money-back guarantee. So there you go.
Oh my goodness, that's like Christmas. That's so many things. Okay, so ultimatenutritionsystem.com/Melanie. Awesome. I will put a link to that in the show notes. Go there now, get all those things. That's so, so incredible. Okay, so the last question that I ask every single guest on this show, and it's just because I realize more and more each day how important mindset is. And this is actually, you talk about this in the book as well. What is something that you're grateful for?
I'm grateful for my relationship with divinity. I think whether people believe in God or they don't believe in God, the utility of believing in a divine super being that you can, communicate with or compare or, create some sort of observational point that is inspiring you to what you can become or how you can overcome the challenges. I think the utility of that is extremely valuable, provided it's not my way versus the highway. In other words, whatever form that you see divinity in your role inside of that, I think it's really grateful. And inside of that, that philosophy has given me inspiration to overcome my challenges, my deficiencies, my failings, my shortcomings, all of those things. And I think that's been really valuable. It's also inspired me to contribute to a larger human family. So I'm grateful to be a single cell in time of the human family as one single body. There's thousands of generations before me. There'll be thousands of generations beyond me. And by adopting that philosophical, spiritual-based belief, it inspires me to continue to grow, to continue to develop, and continue to share, because I see myself as part of a larger aspect over and above my individuality. And I think that the utility of that can't be expressed enough to people. And that's what I'm grateful for.
For me, I'd say right now it's life itself. Just had one of my friends pass away, and I got shot a few years ago and realized how things can change very quickly. And literally, I saw my friend like about 9 days ago on the sidewalk. We had a conversation, and now he's gone. And, life is such a precious miracle. Life is short. Became a father about 2 years ago, and, seeing my daughter grow up and just learn day by day, it actually makes me feel even more grateful for life and how short things are. And Wade and I are in our late 40s, early 50s. And, as Wade said earlier, life's not a guarantee. So yeah, just kind of grateful for every single day. Just feels like every day is a gift.
I am so sorry about your friend. And thank you for sharing all of that. And both of you guys, I am just so grateful for everything that you're doing really, you guys have inspired me for so, so long, even in my podcasting journey, because I've been listening to you guys on different podcasts for years and years. And I remember when, like I said in the beginning, when I first had you on the Intermittent Fasting podcast, you guys might have been our first guests on that show. I'm not sure. It was so long ago now, but basically you've been a theme in my life and my health journey, the podcasting world, just so much inspiration. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you for creating this book. We'll put links in the show notes to everything so listeners can check it out. And I can't wait to interview you guys again, hopefully see you again in person in the future somewhere. And I can't wait to see all the things you guys continue to do. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Melanie Avalon Biohacking Podcast. For more information, you can check out my book, What When Wine? Lose weight and feel great with paleo-style meals, intermittent fasting, and wine, as well as my blog, melanieavalon.com. Feel free to contact me at podcast@melanieavalon.com. And always remember, You got this.